everyone, it is Will from the St. Johns County Public Library System, and we're here for another edition of Homeschool History. So this month's topic is not super exciting for most people. That's okay. It's still really important, and I promise you the activity at the end will be well worth the wait. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So this month we're talking about the Louisiana Purchase. And this is where, under Thomas Jefferson's administration, the size of the United States doubled for the time. So if you can see my little blue dot here, where I'm going over this gray area, this was the area more or less that was a part of the American Revolution that United States gained control of after the United States defeated Britain in the Revolution. All this purple was controlled by other European powers. And the United States ended up purchasing it in 1803 from France, and it doubled the size of the U.S. So let's go into a little bit of background. In the 18th century, which is the 1700s, the Louisiana Territory was coveted by pretty much every European power that was involved in what is now the United States. The big three being Britain, France, and Spain. And France was kind of the first Europeans to lay claim to the Louisiana Territory. Now, keep in mind that this territory is not open and free of people. Different indigenous groups, American Indian tribes, populated this area that France laid claim to. But in the defeat of the 7 Years' War, France ceded the territory to Spain. Spain controlled the area west of the Mississippi, and Britain controlled the east. So this is where Britain gains control of our state, Florida, for 20 years. But at the end of Britain's control of Florida in 1783, they have lost the American Revolution. And this creates the formation of a new country, the United States, where we live now. So this complicated European control of the Louisiana Territory. So the U.S. gained control of areas east and north of New Orleans. But if you lived near that Mississippi River, which was Spanish and then French territory, you wanted to have free access to that river. It was much cheaper and quicker to put your goods on a boat, sail down the river out of the port of New Orleans and into the Gulf than trying to take everything across land in order to ship it elsewhere. Americans did not have free access to the Mississippi River or New Orleans. They did for a little while, but they knew that France or Spain could take that control away at any moment. So initially, the United States worked on purchasing the territory from Spain, but Spain ceded that territory back to France, meaning they gave it back to France. So because of that, President Jefferson sent ambassadors to France to start negotiating the purchase of that territory. However, there were several problems with those negotiations. You had the Federalists versus Jeffersonians. So at this time, you didn't have the same political parties. You didn't have the Democrats, you didn't have the Republicans. The Federalists and Jeffersonians were two different political parties in the United States political system. And there was a huge debate over the constitutionality of the purchase to begin with. Many felt that President Jefferson did not have the authority to negotiate a land sale beyond what were the current territory boundaries of the United States. Spain was a problem. Spain refused to accept the sale at first because of the argument over where the borders lay. So that Louisiana territory borders Florida, and it borders Texas and other areas that were laid claim by Spain. So Spain really wanted to get those borders figured out before they would accept the sale of the Louisiana Purchase. There were some overlapping claims on where the borders actually lay. And right here, Florida, a large port of contention was the western boundary of Florida. So at this time, Spain thought that Florida Panhandle went all the way over into what's now Alabama, and the Louisiana Purchase did not agree with that. So there were some issues there that had to be figured out. You also run into problems of inclusion. So now you have a whole bunch of residents in the Louisiana Territory. These are French or Spanish, some are former slaves, or different American Indian tribes. What becomes of them? Are they now automatically U.S. citizens because the United States bought that territory, or are they something else? There The United States was extremely worried about French slaves, what to do with them. Did they go back with their French masters if they left? Did they stay in the United States? Did they get sold elsewhere? And the biggest thing as well is in that territory, they had to decide, would they even allow slavery in those territories? So keep in mind, the United States practiced slavery at the time, and you had slavery in Georgia, Alabama, those kinds of states, Virginia. But was the United States going to allow slavery into this now new territory? So there's a bunch of worry there. So again, one of the biggest bones of contention were the boundaries of Louisiana Territory. So what Thomas Jefferson did, he's like, okay, fine, I'm going to go map this out. If I map it out and have it on paper, then that's going to be my territory, because no one had mapped out these boundaries like the way that he commissioned. So the big one is the Lewis and Clark expedition from 1803 to 1806. They mapped from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. They went beyond what would become the boundaries of Louisiana Territory. You also have the Red River expedition in 1806, and it wanted to find the headwaters of the Red River from the Mississippi River. This expedition did not complete its goal. They were turned back by the Spanish 1,650 miles upstream because they'd actually entered into Spanish territory. The Pike expedition in 1806 to 1807 was tasked with exploring what is now today Colorado. They accidentally ended up in Spanish territory and they were captured. And then the Adam-Onis Treaty of 1819 clarified the western borders of Louisiana Purchase and also handed over Florida to the United States. We purchased Louisiana Territory in 1803. It's not until 1819 that Spain stops contending or challenging the borders of Louisiana Purchase. In order to do that, we had to establish boundaries and actually succeed in gaining Florida from Spain. So you're looking at least 15 years before that was settled. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States. It also brought forth issues that we would see later culminate in the Civil War, what to do with inclusion of citizens from other countries, other nations, and what to do with slavery, whether or not we were going to let that expand or keep it to where it currently existed within the United States. And if we didn't, what would happen to slaves who found themselves in free territories? All that being said, we're now going to work on the hands-on portion of this, and these are the supplies that you need. You're going to need peanut butter dough or any dough of your choice. It could be sugar cookie, it could be chocolate chip if you wanted, it could be some sort of edible dough. This is where if you don't have an adult with you, you're probably going to want to get one. You're going to need some sort of platter, clean mat, a baking sheet, some sort of knife, a printed map to the United States with Louisiana Purchase on it. You can Google these pretty easily. Icing, Hershey Kisses, chocolate chips, any other decorations that you want. And if you meet me over in the kitchen, we'll get started on this point. All right, guys, so here in the kitchen, and we're going to be making our Louisiana Purchase cookie. Make sure you have some sort of map. If you really want to be detailed with your United States, if you just kind of wing it, that's okay too. We're going to make a very, very simple peanut butter cookie recipe, but you can use any cookie recipe that you would like to use. All right, so Katie is going to come help me make this cookie.
Hi guys, I'm Katie. I am going to be showing you today how to make a peanut butter cookie recipe. So I have a pretty simple recipe that I just found online, so I'm going to be working through it with you guys today. So the first thing you're going to want to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees, which I've already got going. You're going to need a few things. You're going to need a cookie sheet, some parchment paper to line the cookie sheet with so your cookie doesn't stick, a mixing bowl, all of your measuring utensils, something to mix with, and then all of your ingredients. I also have with me a little hand mixer, which you can use a stand mixer, either or, it doesn't really matter. And let's get started. So for this recipe, you're going to need 1.5 cups of flour. So the easiest way to do this is you're going to want to spoon your flour mixture into your cup. This will make sure that your measurement is, for the most part, accurate. It also keeps the flour from clumping and keeps it light and airy. It's okay if a little extra gets in there, no worries. You're just going to want to level it off. So now I have my cup of flour. I'm going to put it directly in my mixing bowl. All right, and then my half cup of flour I'm going to add in. So we have a cup and a half of flour. So the next thing you want to do is add the rest of your dry ingredients first and mix them together before you add in your wet ingredients. So we are going to go ahead and add in a half teaspoon of baking soda. Now, if you have unsalted butter, you are going to want to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I, however, do not have unsalted butter. I'm using salted butter. So I'm not going to add any additional salt to my recipe. So you're also going to need 3/4 cups of brown sugar. We also need a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. So I'm going to add that in. There'll be some sweet cookies. All right, that's it for our dry ingredients. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to whisk this together and make sure everything gets nice and incorporated and sort of blends in. So what this does is this keeps us from getting clumps, and it helps make sure that we have a little bit of everything throughout the dough. So if you don't have a whisk, you can use a fork. I do have a whisk. I'm just using a fork for convenience, so you can use whatever you prefer. So now we have all of our ingredients incorporated into our flour. What we are going to do now is add all of the wet ingredients to this. So the first thing we want to do is add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I have my teaspoon right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. We're going to need 1 egg at room temperature. If it happens to be cold, I won't tell. So for our egg, we're just going to add that to our vanilla. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to whisk that together. All right, here's the part everyone's been wanting. We're going to go ahead and add in a 1/2 cup of unsalted butter, or as I said, if you only have salted butter, that's okay. Just don't add any additional salt to your recipe. I only have salted butter. So what I'm going to do is, it says to use softened. Mine's not 100% softened. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grate it into my recipe. All right, make sure you get all that butter in there. All right, so now that my butter is grated in, I'm going to go ahead and incorporate it into the flour. So what this does is make sure that we get those little balls of butter throughout the dough. I'm going to go ahead and get my mixer out. So you're going to want to start out on low setting so that you don't get flour everywhere. So now we've got these little coated little buttery pieces in our dough, which they're going to break up more as we go in the recipe. And when we start to roll out the dough, it'll incorporate more. All right, so now we're going to add 3/4 cups of peanut butter. You can also use almond butter, cashew butter, hazelnut butter, or hazelnut spread. So I'm going to retake my 1/4 cup, and to get the peanut butter out easier because it tends to stick, I am going to coat it with a little bit of oil. So I'm going to use a little bit of vegetable oil. You can use whatever you have on hand, coconut oil, olive oil, and I'm just going to put it onto a paper towel like that and give it a little bit of a coat. Okay, so I have my 1/4 cup. The outside. This is the messy part. Okay, so I've added in my peanut butter to my flour. We're going to go ahead and add in our wet ingredients, which was our egg and vanilla. Pour that in there. Now we're going to get our mixer again. We're going to start on low and we're going to incorporate everything. All right, once your dough is ready, the next step is going to be to clean up your workstation a little bit, put your stuff away. At this point, we are getting ready to make our cookies. All right, so I cleaned up my workstation a little bit, and now we're going to roll out that dough. So the easiest way to do this, even if you don't have a rolling pin, is to line your cutting board or your surface with some parchment paper. Now what we're going to do is take our dough and we're going to put it out on our parchment paper. All right, take your dough, push it down just a little bit. You're going to take a second sheet of parchment paper, lay it on top of your dough. All you're going to do is you're just going to flatten this out with your hands. All right, so with a little effort, we have flattened out our peanut butter cookie dough. And if you want to make sure to get it really flat, once you start to push it out, just go back over it with your hand, just rub the dough, feel it, try to level it out, make it as even as possible. You want your cookie to cook even. Now you can peel back this top layer of parchment paper. Voila. So we can go ahead and reuse this piece of parchment paper on our baking sheet. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take our stencil that we talked about previously. And we are going to lay it on top of our dough. And you might have enough dough here to get 2 stencils out of it. Just kind of lay it on there. You're going to take a knife, butter knife, and you're just going to trace around your stencil. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to notice that your stencil paper is going to start absorbing that oil. That's okay. Now I can peel my stencil off very slowly. If you have enough room for 2, go ahead and do 2 if you would like. Now we have 2 cookies. What we're going to do is we're going to remove this extra dough from around them. Throw that back in our little mixing bowl for now. Now you can reuse this extra dough and roll out some more peanut butter cookies using the same methods that I showed you earlier. If you notice your dough is getting too soft, you can pop it back in the fridge for about 15 minutes. That will help it kind of solidify a little bit more. I have my 2 cookies. Look at how much extra dough we have. Oh yeah, we're making extra cookies out of this. Now I kind of want to spread these out on my cookie sheet because I don't want them to expand and end up growing into one another and then not being able to separate them. So I'm going to try to spread these out on my this. This didn't work the way I planned. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to split them up over 2 cookie sheets just to help with baking. All right, so I have my cookies on my cookie sheets, and I'm going to go ahead and bake them for 10 to 12 minutes. All right, so our cookies are set to bake. We're going to let them bake for about 10 to 12 minutes, and then when they're done, we're going to pull them out of the oven, let them cool for about 5 minutes or so, and then we can move on to making our Louisiana Purchase. All right, our timer just went off, so I'm going to check the cookies and make sure that they're done. We're going to let that cool for 5 minutes.
All right, guys, so you should have something that looks more or less like the United States. This guy has cooled for about 5 to 7 minutes.
Mhm.
And now we are going to decorate the portion that is the Louisiana Purchase. So I got my map out here again so that I can make sure I mark off the right area. I have icing, chocolate chips, chocolate and chocolate. There we go. You can use any sort of decoration that you want. All right, so I'm using the chocolate icing first. It's not going to be super accurate. You just kind of want to get the basic area where the purchase was. So I pretty much marked off the chocolate land that was the Louisiana Purchase. So what I'm going to do now is use the little chocolate chips here and mark off to the best of my ability where the Mississippi River is, especially since that was a big boundary to mark off the original border of the United States and the starting point of the territory that is the Louisiana Purchase. Now, if you have blue icing, you can use blue icing for that. I don't have blue icing. Mississippi River is a big, long river, and you could even do things like mark off some of the other rivers that feed into it, like the Missouri River. So I'll use my little chocolate chips and do my best to do that as well. All right, guys, and now we have our cookie map. And this whole chocolatey, wonderful area is a Louisiana Purchase. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next month for another homeschool history.